The days that followed the revelation of the Krylos' involvement were tense but quieter than before. The evidence Daniel and Alira had uncovered managed to calm some of the anger between humans and Velari, though not everyone was convinced. Suspicion still lingered in the air, like a storm waiting to break. For Daniel and Alira, however, their bond had grown stronger through the ordeal. They had faced danger together, trusted each other completely, and proven that cooperation was possible, even between two very different species. One evening, after another long day of negotiations, Daniel found himself walking with Alira along the edge of the settlement. The twin suns had set, leaving the sky painted in deep shades of purple and black. Stars glittered above them, distant pinpricks of light scattered across the heavens. The quiet beauty of the moment was soothing, a welcome contrast to the chaos they had endured. "You risked much for this," Alira said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft but carried a weight that made Daniel pause. "So did you," he replied, glancing at her. "You could have stayed safe and let others handle it. But you didn't." Alira shook her head slightly. "It wasn't about safety. It was about doing what was right. My people value honor above all else. But sometimes I wonder if we've forgotten what true honor means." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. "Honor isn't just about following rules or protecting your own. It's about standing up for what's good, even when it's hard, even when it costs you something." She looked away, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I've spent my life trying to live up to my people's expectations. But lately, I've started to question whether those expectations are enough." Daniel listened quietly, sensing the vulnerability beneath her words. He knew how much courage it took for her to share these thoughts. "You're braver than you think," he said gently. "Most people wouldn't dare to question the things they've always believed in." Alira turned to look at him, her green eyes searching his face. "And what about you? Do you ever doubt yourself?" "All the time," Daniel admitted with a small laugh. "But I've learned that doubt isn't always bad. Sometimes it pushes us to grow to become better versions of ourselves." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind rustled through the nearby trees, carrying with it the faint scent of flowers. Then Alira sighed, her expression softening. "You remind me of someone I once knew," she said quietly. "Oh?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "My younger self," Alira replied, "before I became a warrior, before I learned to hide my emotions behind armor and duty." Daniel smiled. "Maybe that part of you is still there. Maybe you just need to let her out again." Alira chuckled softly, though there was sadness in her laughter. "If only it were that simple." "It can be," Daniel insisted. "Sometimes all it takes is one step of decision to change, even if it's small." His words seemed to resonate with her. For the first time in years, Alira allowed herself to imagine a different path, one where she didn't have to carry the weight of her entire race on her shoulders, where she could be more than just a commander, more than just a symbol of strength. And maybe, just maybe, she could find happiness along the way. Back at the negotiation hall, tensions continued to simmer. While many had accepted the evidence against the Krylos, some remained unconvinced. Among the humans, a faction led by a man named Victor Kane grew increasingly vocal in their opposition to the talks. Kane was tall and broad-shouldered with sharp features and a commanding presence. He had always been skeptical of the Velari, viewing them as a threat rather than potential allies. "This alliance is a mistake," Kane declared during one heated session. "We're putting our trust in beings who attacked us without provocation. They didn't attack us." Daniel shot back, his patience wearing thin. "The Krylos did? Or have you forgotten the proof?" Kane sneered. "Proof provided by them," he said, gesturing toward the Velari delegation. "How convenient." Alira stepped forward, her voice icy. "Are you calling me a liar? I'm calling you dangerous," Kane retorted. "Your kind has no place among us." The room erupted into arguments once again, voices rising until it felt like the walls might shake. Daniel clenched his fists, frustration bubbling inside him. No matter how much progress they made, there were always those who refused to see reason. After the meeting ended, Alira pulled Daniel aside. "This cannot continue," she said firmly. "Every day, the divisions grow deeper. If we don't act soon, everything we've worked for will be lost. What do you suggest?" Daniel asked. "We need to show them that peace is possible." Alira replied, "Not just with words, but with actions. Something that proves we're stronger together than apart." Daniel thought for a moment, then nodded. "There's a festival tomorrow night, part of the Velari tradition. It celebrates unity and resilience. What if we invite the humans to join? Showed them a side of your culture they haven't seen before?" Alira hesitated, clearly unsure. "It's risky. Many of my people won't approve." "Then let's make it worth the risk," Daniel said earnestly. "Sometimes taking a leap of faith is the only way to move forward." Reluctantly, Alira agreed. The next evening, as the stars began to appear in the sky, the festival grounds came alive with music, laughter, and color. Torches flickered in the breeze, casting warm light over tables laden with food and drink. Warriors performed intricate dances, their movements fluid and powerful, while musicians played instruments that filled the air with haunting melodies dotted first. The humans were hesitant, lingering on the edges of the celebration. But slowly, curiosity got the better way. Some joined in the dancing, awkward at first, but soon laughing as they stumbled through the steps. Others sampled the food, marveling at flavors unlike anything they'd ever tasted. Children ran around, chasing glowing insects that hovered like tiny lanterns. Daniel watched from a distance, a smile spreading across his face. Beside him, Alira stood quietly, observing the scene with a mixture of pride and apprehension. "Do you see?" Daniel said softly. "They're not so different after all." Alira nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "Perhaps you're right." As the night wore on, the atmosphere grew warmer, friendlier. Barriers that had seemed insurmountable began to crumble, replaced by shared moments of joy and understanding. For the first time in weeks, hope felt tangible, a fragile but real possibility, but not everyone was pleased. Across the settlement, shadowy figures watched the festivities with disdain. Cain and his followers muttered angrily among themselves, plotting ways to undermine the fragile peace. Meanwhile, whispers spread among certain factions of the Velari, questioning Alira's loyalty and accusing her of betraying her people. Despite the growing threats, Daniel and Alira held on to their belief that unity was possible. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, fraught with challenges and sacrifices. But as they stood together under the starlit sky, surrounded by laughter and music, they allowed themselves to dream of a brighter future, a future where humans and Velari could truly stand as one. The fragile peace between Earth and the Velari was shattered one fateful morning. News of an attack spread quickly through the settlement, sending shockwaves through both delegations. A human outpost near the border had been ambushed, its defenses overwhelmed by unknown assailants. The damage was severe: ships destroyed, equipment ruined, and lives lost. Panic gripped the humans while suspicion flared among the Velari. Daniel heard the news during breakfast. He had been sitting alone, sipping tea and reviewing notes for the day's negotiations, when a messenger burst into the room. "Sir, there's been an incident," the man said breathlessly. "One of our outposts was attacked last night." Daniel's heart sank. "Attacked? By whom?" "We don't know yet," the messenger replied. "But it happened close to Velari territory." Daniel stood up immediately, his mind racing. This couldn't be happening. Not now, not when they were so close to finding common ground. He grabbed his coat and hurried to the meeting hall, where chaos had already erupted. Inside, voices clashed like thunder. Human representatives accused the Velari of orchestrating the attack, pointing fingers and demanding answers. The Velari, in turn, denied any involvement, their expressions cold and defiant. Alira stood at the center of the storm, her tall, framed commanding attention as she tried to restore order. "This is unacceptable," shouted one of the human leaders, slamming his fist on the table. "Your people did this. You think we're fools." Alira's eyes narrowed, her voice cutting through the noise. "We are not responsible for this crime," she said sharply. "To accuse us without proof is an insult to our honor." Daniel stepped forward, raising his hands to calm everyone down. "Let's not jump to conclusions," he urged. "We need evidence before we start blaming anyone." But his words fell on deaf ears. The tension in the room was palpable, thick, enough to choke on. Accusations flew back and forth, each side digging deeper into their positions. It seemed like all the progress they had made over the past weeks was crumbling right before their eyes. Later that evening, Daniel sought out Alira. She was standing outside the negotiation hall, gazing up at the stars with a troubled expression. Her armor gleamed faintly under the light of the twin moons, but her usual confidence seemed shaken. "Alira," Daniel said softly, approaching her cautiously. She turned to face him, her green eyes filled with conflict. "They blame us," she said bitterly, "even though we had nothing to do with it." "I know," Daniel replied, "but not everyone thinks that way. Some of us still believe in finding the truth." Alira sighed, looking away. "And what if the truth doesn't matter? What if this attack was meant to destroy the talks entirely?" Daniel hesitated, then placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we can't let it win. If we give up now, whoever did this gets exactly what they want." Alira studied him for a moment, her gaze searching his face. Finally, she nodded. "What do you propose we do?" "We investigate," Daniel said firmly. "Together. If we can find out who's really behind this, we might have a chance to save the negotiations." It was a risky plan, but Alira agreed. They decided to act quickly, knowing time was against them. Under the cover of darkness, they slipped away from the settlement, heading toward the site of the attack. The journey was long and treacherous, taking them through dense forests and rocky terrain. Along the way, they spoke little, focusing on the task ahead. When they reached the outpost, the scene was devastating. Craters scarred the ground, and twisted metal lay scattered everywhere. The air smelled of smoke and ash, a grim reminder of the violence that had occurred. Daniel and Alira moved carefully, examining the wreckage for clues as they searched. Alira noticed something odd, a piece of alien technology embedded in the debris. It wasn't Velari. She recognized the design immediately. "This belongs to the Krylos," she said, holding it up for Daniel to see. "The Krylos?" Daniel frowned. "Who are they?" "A rival species," Alira explained. "They've been trying to drive a wedge between us and humanity for years. This could be their doing." Daniel's jaw tightened. If the Krylos are behind this, they must have known it would make the Velari look guilty. "Yes," Alira said grimly. And it almost worked. Determined to gather more evidence, they continued their search. Hours passed, and just as dawn began to break, they found what they were looking for, a recording device hidden beneath the rubble. Activating it, they watched footage of shadowy figures planning explosives and launching the attack. The attackers wore uniforms unmistakably belonging to the Krylos. "This proves it," Daniel said, relief washing over him. "Now we can show everyone the truth." But Alira's expression remained grave. "Taking this evidence back won't be easy. My people may not believe it, and you certainly won't trust it if it comes from me." Daniel thought for a moment, then nodded. "Then we'll present it together. Both of us, side by side. If we stand united, maybe others will follow." Returning to the settlement was dangerous. Word of their absence had spread, and both sides were suspicious of their sudden reappearance. When they arrived, they were met with hostility. Humans demanded explanations, while Velari elders questioned Alira's loyalty. But Daniel refused to back down. Standing in the middle of the negotiation hall, he addressed the crowd. "We found proof of who's truly responsible for the attack," he announced, holding up the recording device. It wasn't the Veilari, it was the Krylos. They wanted to destroy the talks and turn us against each other. Murmurs rippled through the room as the footage played on a large screen. The truth was undeniable, and slowly the tension began to ease. Some humans lowered their accusing stares, while a few Veilari nodded in approval. Illyra stepped forward, her voice steady. "I acted on my own to uncover this evidence," she admitted, "because I believed it was the right thing to do. If you see that as betrayal, then punish me accordingly." Her words hung in the air, heavy with courage. For a moment no one spoke. Then one of the Veilari elders rose to his feet. "You broke our laws," he said sternly. "But your actions saved us from greater harm. We cannot ignore that." Daniel felt a surge of hope. Turning to the humans, he added, "This proves we can work together. If we focus on the real threats, instead of fighting each other, we might actually achieve peace." Though the road ahead would still be difficult, the immediate crisis had been averted. Illyra and Daniel had risked everything to expose the truth. And in doing so, they had strengthened the fragile bond between their peoples. Little did they know, however, that their actions had also drawn the ire of powerful enemies' enemies who would stop at nothing to ensure the alliance failed. For now, though, they allowed themselves a brief moment of triumph. As they stood side by side, surrounded by those who had once doubted them, Daniel glanced at Illyra and smiled. She returned the gesture, her green eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and determination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The days turned into weeks, and the negotiations between Earth and the Veilari continued. The talks were slow and often frustrating, with both sides struggling to find common ground. The humans wanted access to resources on Veilari territory, while the Veilari demanded guarantees that their sovereignty would remain untouched. It was a delicate balance, one that required patience and understanding, qualities that Daniel seemed to possess in abundance. Every morning, Daniel would arrive at the meeting hall early, taking a moment to observe the surroundings. The crystalline towers of the Veilari settlement sparkled in the sunlight, casting colorful reflections onto the ground. Birds with iridescent feathers flitted through the air, their songs blending with the soft hum of the buildings. Despite the tension, there was an undeniable beauty to this place, and Daniel found himself appreciating it more each day. Illyra was usually already there when he arrived, standing tall and composed as she reviewed notes or spoke quietly with her advisors. She rarely smiled, but Daniel had begun to notice small changes in her demeanor whenever he entered the room. Her shoulders would relax slightly, and her piercing green eyes would soften just a fraction. These subtle shifts gave him hope that they were making progress, not just in the negotiations, but in building trust between their two peoples. One morning, as the session began, a heated argument broke out over trade agreements. One of the human representatives accused the Veilari of being unwilling to compromise, while Veilari elders shot back that humanity's greed knew no bounds. Voices rose, tempers flared, and it seemed like the entire effort might collapse right then and there. But before things could spiral completely out of control, Daniel stood up. "Enough," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the chaos. Everyone fell silent, turning to look at him. "We're not going to solve anything by shouting at each other." He took a deep breath and looked around the room, meeting the eyes of both humans and Veilari. Both sides want something from this agreement. That's why we're here. But if we can't listen to each other, none of this matters. Let's take a step back and remember why we started these talks in the first place. His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Slowly, the tension in the room began to ease. Illyra watched him closely, her expression unreadable. When the meeting resumed, the tone had shifted. People spoke more calmly, more thoughtfully. Though no major breakthroughs were made that day, the atmosphere improved significantly. Afterward, Illyra approached Daniel as he gathered his notes. "You handled that well," she said, her voice low so only he could hear. Not many humans had the courage to speak so boldly. Daniel shrugged modestly. "It wasn't about being bold. It was about finding a way forward. If we keep fighting, neither side wins. Alira nodded, though her gaze lingered on him for a moment longer than necessary. Perhaps you are right, she said. Then, after a pause, she added, walk with me. They stepped outside together, leaving the others behind. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of flowers blooming nearby. As they walked along a narrow path lined with glowing plants, Alira asked questions about Earth. What was it like? How did humans live? Did they truly value peace, or was it just words? Daniel answered honestly, describing the diversity of human cultures and the challenges they faced. He told her about cities bustling with life, vast oceans teeming with creatures, and quiet forests where time seemed to stand still. He admitted that humanity wasn't perfect. They made mistakes, argued among themselves, and sometimes acted selfishly. But they also dreamed big, worked hard, and cared deeply for one another. Alira listened intently, her curiosity evident. Your people sound complicated, she said finally. Daniel chuckled. That's one way to put it. But aren't all people complicated? Even yours? She considered this for a moment. Yes, she admitted, though we try to hide it behind our honor and discipline. Maybe that's part of what makes us alike, Daniel suggested. We're all trying to figure things out, even if we do it differently. Their conversation flowed naturally, covering topics ranging from art and music to philosophy and morality. Alira shared stories of her own upbringing, revealing glimpses of a childhood marked by strict training and high expectations. She spoke of battles fought and lessons learned, her voice steady, but tinged with emotion. Daniel listened without interrupting, offering nods and thoughtful responses when appropriate. He didn't push her to share more than she was comfortable with, and she appreciated that. For the first time in years, she felt like someone truly understood her, not because they agreed with everything she said, but because they respected her enough to listen. As the suns began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, they stopped near a small pond. Its surface shimmered like glass, reflecting the vibrant colors of the heavens above. Alira gazed at the water, her expression contemplative. You are different from the others, she said suddenly, breaking the silence. Most humans see us as obstacles to overcome or enemies to defeat, but you see us as equals. I believe everyone deserves respect, Daniel replied simply, even if we don't always agree. Alira turned to face him, her green eyes searching his. And what do you see when you look at me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel hesitated, surprised by the question. I see strength, he said finally, but also kindness. You care deeply about your people, even if you don't show it openly. And I see someone who's willing to fight not just for victory, but for what's right. For a moment, Alira said nothing. Then, a faint smile touched her lips. No one has ever described me that way before. Well, maybe they should, Daniel said with a grin. They stood there for a while longer, watching the last rays of sunlight fade into darkness. Neither of them realized how much their bond was growing or how dangerous it might become. Back in the negotiation chambers, whispers had started spreading about Daniel and Alira spending so much time together. Some saw it as a sign of weakness, while others viewed it as a threat. Tension simmered beneath the surface, ready to boil over at any moment. But for now, Daniel and Alira remained focused on their mission. They believed that understanding and cooperation were possible, even between two vastly different species. Little did they know, their journey was about to take a dramatic turn, one that would test their resolve and force them to confront the true cost of peace. The spaceship descended slowly through the thick, swirling clouds of the alien planet. The air outside was a strange mix of violet and gold, glowing faintly as if lit by an unseen fire. Inside the craft, Daniel Carter sat quietly, his hands resting on his knees. He wasn't nervous exactly, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was unlike anything he had ever done before. The Velari were not known for being welcoming. They were warriors, proud and strong, with a reputation for distrusting outsiders. And yet, here he was, sent by Earth to try and form some kind of understanding with them. Daniel wasn't like most diplomats. He didn't wear fancy suits or speak in long, complicated sentences. Instead, he preferred simple words and honest gestures. His brown hair was always a little messy, and his blue eyes carried a calmness that made people feel at ease. It was this quiet confidence that had earned him the job of representing humanity in talks with the Velari. But even Daniel knew this. Wouldn't be easy. As the ship landed, the door hissed open, revealing a wide expanse of green fields dotted with towering crystalline structures. These buildings shimmered under the light of two suns, casting rainbows across the ground. Standing near one of these structures was a group of Velari, their tall frames clad in armor that gleamed like polished silver. Among them stood Alira, the leader of their delegation. She was taller than the others, her long white hair flowing down her back like a river of moonlight. Her piercing green eyes scanned the humans as they stepped out of the ship, stopping briefly on Daniel before moving on. "Greetings," said Daniel, stepping forward. His voice was steady, though his heart raced slightly. "We come in peace." Alira tilted her head slightly, studying him. Most humans who came to negotiate with the Velari were either too eager to prove themselves or too arrogant to listen. But there was something different about this man. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He simply stood there, waiting patiently for her response. "You have entered our world uninvited," she said finally, her voice smooth but firm. "Why should we trust you?" Daniel nodded, expecting the question. "Because we want to learn," he replied. "Not just about your technology or your weapons, but about your people, about you." For a moment, no one spoke. The wind rustled through the grass, carrying with it the faint scent of flowers. Then Alira gave a small nod, signaling for her guards to lower their weapons. "Come," she said. "We will talk." The meeting took place inside one of the crystalline towers. The walls seemed to hum softly, as though alive, and the room was filled with soft, shifting colors. Daniel sat across from Alira, flanked by other human representatives. The air was tense, each side carefully choosing their words. While the others focused on trade agreements and military alliances, Daniel found himself watching Alira. There was a grace to her movements, a strength that went beyond her physical presence. She listened intently to every word spoken, her sharp mind processing everything quickly. At one point, Daniel leaned forward slightly. "May I ask something?" he said, addressing Alira directly. She raised an eyebrow. "Ask. What do your people value most?" he asked. "If there's one thing that defines the Velari, what would it be?" The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that before. For a moment, she hesitated, then answered. "Honor. We live by a code of honor. To betray it is to lose yourself." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense," he said. "On Earth, we have similar ideas, though they're expressed differently. Honor means keeping promises, standing up for what's right, even when it's hard." Alira studied him again, her expression unreadable. "You speak as though you understand us," she said, "but you are not Velari." "No," Daniel admitted. "But maybe understanding doesn't mean being the same. Maybe it means seeing the similarities beneath the differences." The comment lingered in the air, drawing curious glances from both sides. Alira didn't respond immediately, but Daniel noticed a flicker of interest in her eyes. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Over the next few days, the negotiations continued. Progress was slow, with many arguments breaking out over minor details. But Daniel kept finding ways to connect with Alira. During breaks, he asked her questions about Velari history and traditions. He shared stories of his own life on Earth, how he grew up in a small town surrounded by forests, how he loved watching storms roll in over the hills. At first, Alira listened without saying much, but gradually, she began opening up. She told him about her training as a warrior, about the challenges she faced leading her people. One evening, after a particularly heated debate, Daniel approached her as she stood alone near the edge of the field. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said softly. Illyra glanced at him. "It is familiar," she said. "To me, beauty lies in strength, not scenery." "But isn't strength beautiful too?" Daniel countered. "When you fight to protect someone or something, that's beautiful." Illyra turned to look at him fully now, her green eyes locking onto his. "You are unusual," she said. After a pause, "Most humans would not dare to speak to me so freely." "I'm not most humans," Daniel replied with a slight smile. "And besides, I think you'd agree I'm harmless." She gave a low chuckle, surprising herself. Perhaps. Though neither of them realized it at the time, that conversation marked the beginning of something unexpected, something neither of their worlds had seen before. As the negotiations dragged on, Daniel and Illyra grew closer, their mutual curiosity evolving into a deeper connection. Little did they know, this bond would soon be tested in ways neither could imagine. The festival had been a success, but its effects were short-lived. The fragile peace it created began to unravel almost immediately. Rumors spread quickly through both the human and Velari camps, fueled by those who opposed any kind of alliance. Among the humans, Victor Kane led the charge, accusing Daniel of being too trusting and naive. "He's blinded by his feelings for that alien," Kane sneered during one heated argument. "How can we trust him when he's clearly compromised?" Illyra faced similar criticism from her own people. Some of the Velari elders accused her of showing favoritism toward humanity, while others whispered that she had abandoned her duty as a warrior. Despite her efforts to maintain balance, Illyra found herself caught between two worlds neither fully accepting her, both demanding more than she could give. Daniel noticed the strain on her face. She was quieter now, her usual confidence replaced by a guarded expression. One evening, after a particularly grueling negotiation session, he approached her as she stood alone near the edge of the settlement. The twin moons hung low in the sky, casting a pale glow over the landscape. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked softly. Illyra didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared out at the horizon, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "I don't know anymore," she admitted finally. "Every choice I make seems to anger someone. If I stand with my people, the humans see me as an enemy. If I try to help them, my own kind accuse me of betrayal." "You're not betraying anyone," Daniel said firmly. "You're doing what's right." "That's not easy, but it's important." Illyra turned to look at him, her green eyes filled with conflict. "And what happens if doing what's right costs everything? My rank, my honor, maybe even my life." "It won't come to that," Daniel replied, though doubt lingered in his mind. He reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure this out together. Whatever happens, you won't face it alone." For a moment, Illyra allowed herself to believe him. His words carried a sincerity that made her feel stronger, if only briefly. But deep down, she knew the challenges ahead would test them both in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The next day brought fresh trouble. A group of rogue Velari warriors, angered by the ongoing negotiations, launched a surprise attack on a human-supplied convoy traveling near the border. The convoy was small and lightly guarded, making it an easy target. When news of the attack reached the settlement, panic erupted once again. Daniel rushed to the scene alongside several other humans and Velari officials. The sight was devastating: burned-out vehicles, scattered supplies, and injured soldiers lying on the ground. Medics worked frantically to tend to the wounded, their faces grim. Amid the chaos, Daniel spotted Illyra standing nearby, her expression unreadable. "What happened here?" he asked, approaching her cautiously. "The rogues acted without orders." Illyra said stiffly, "They do not speak for the Velari Council or for me." "I believe you," Daniel said quickly. "But others won't. Not unless we prove it." Alira nodded, though her jaw tightened. Then let's find them. Together. Once again, they set off into dangerous territory, determined to track down the rogue warriors. Their journey took them through rugged terrain, across rivers and over mountains. Along the way, they relied on each other completely, sharing food, water, and shelter under the stars. Nights were cold, but their conversations kept them warm. One evening, as they sat around a small campfire, Daniel asked, "Why? Do you think they did it?" "The rogues, I mean." Alira stared into the flames, her voice heavy with regret. "Some of my people fear change. They see the talks with humans as a threat to our way of life, a sign of weakness. To them, violence is the only answer." "But isn't peace stronger than war?" Daniel asked. "In theory, yes," Alira replied. "But strength is easier to understand. Peace requires trust, and trust takes time." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe that's why they're afraid. Change is hard, especially when you've always done things one way." Alira glanced at him, a faint smile touching her lips. "You have a way of seeing things clearly, don't you?" "I just call it like I see it," Daniel said with a shrug. "Besides, sometimes it helps to hear a different perspective." Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, forged in the fires of adversity. When they finally tracked down the rogue warriors, hiding in a remote cave system, they moved swiftly and decisively. Using a combination of strategy and stealth, they managed to disarm the group without further bloodshed. Several of the rogues surrendered willingly, while others fled into the wilderness, returning to the settlement with the captured warriors. Daniel and Alira presented their findings to the council. The evidence was undeniable. The attack had been carried out without official sanction. Still, some remain unconvinced, accusing Alira of orchestrating the entire mission to clear her name. "You expect us to believe this was coincidence?" one of the elders demanded, pointing an accusing finger at her. "You went missing for days, and suddenly these criminals appear? Convenient, isn't it?" Alira stood tall, meeting his gaze without flinching. "If you choose to doubt me, so be it. But know this: I acted to protect both our peoples. If that makes me guilty, then punish me accordingly." Her courage silenced the room. Even her critics hesitated, unable to deny the truth of her words. Slowly, the tension eased, though not entirely. For now, the immediate crisis had passed, but the underlying divisions remained. Later that night, Daniel joined Alira on a hill overlooking the settlement. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of distant rain. Below them, lights twinkled like stars, a reminder of the fragile community they were fighting to build. "You've done so much for this," Daniel said quietly. "More than anyone else. And yet, it feels like nothing has changed," Alira replied, her voice tinged with sadness. "The hatred runs too deep. How can we ever overcome it?" "One step at a time," Daniel said. "It won't happen overnight, but every little effort matters. Every bridge we build brings us closer to understanding." Alira sighed, leaning back on her hands. "You have faith in something most would call impossible." "Faith doesn't mean ignoring the challenges," Daniel said. "It means believing we can rise above them, even if it's hard." As they sat there, side by side, watching the world stretch out before them, a sense of quiet determination settled over them. They knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, filled with sacrifices neither of them could foresee. But they also knew they weren't walking it alone. Together, they had already achieved what many thought was unthinkable. And together, they would keep trying no matter the cost. In the distance, thunder rumbled softly, signaling an approaching storm. Yet neither of them moved. They stayed where they were, finding strength in each other's presence, ready to face whatever came next. The storm that had rumbled in the distance finally arrived, sweeping across the settlement with a fury that mirrored the turmoil within. Rain lashed against the crystalline towers, turning their shimmering surfaces into streaks of silver and gold. Inside the negotiation hall, tempers flared as accusations flew back and forth. The fragile peace Daniel and Alira had worked so hard to build was crumbling under the weight of suspicion and fear. Alira stood in the center of the room, her tall frame rigid with resolve. Her green eyes scanned the faces around her humans, glaring at Valari, Valari glaring at humans. She could feel the tension pressing down on her like a physical weight. Despite everything she and Daniel had done, it wasn't enough. The hatred ran too deep, the wounds too fresh. "We cannot continue like this," she said finally, her voice cutting through the noise. "If we do not find a way to trust each other, then all is lost." Her words were met with silence, but only for a moment. Victor Kane stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. "Trust them? After everything they've done? They attacked us. They betrayed us. They did no such thing." Daniel snapped, stepping up beside Alira. His usually calm demeanor was gone, replaced by frustration. "We found proof the rogues acted alone. You're just looking for excuses to keep fighting," Kane sneered. "And how convenient that you're always quick to defend them. Tell me, Daniel, what exactly is your connection to their commander?" The question hung in the air, sharp and accusatory. Murmurs spread through the room as people turned to look at Daniel and Alira. Their closeness had been noticed before, whispered about in quiet corners, but now it was being dragged into the open. Daniel clenched his fist, forcing himself to stay calm. "My connection to Alira has nothing to do with this. What matters is finding a solution, not spreading more hate." But Kane wasn't finished. "Oh, I think it does matter. Your friendship seems suspiciously close, doesn't it? How can we trust anything you say when you're clearly biased?" Before Daniel could respond, Alira stepped forward, her voice icy. "If you wish to accuse me of something, do so directly. Do not drag others into your petty arguments." Her defiance silenced Kane, but only briefly. He opened his mouth to retort, but one of the human leaders raised a hand to stop him. "Enough," the older man said firmly. "This bickering solves nothing. We need to focus on moving forward or risk losing everything." The meeting ended shortly after, but the damage had been done. As they left the hall, Daniel felt a heavy sense of dread settle over him. He glanced at Alira, who walked silently beside him, her expression unreadable. Neither of them spoke until they reached a secluded spot near the edge of the settlement. "You shouldn't have defended me," Alira said quietly, breaking the silence. "It only made things worse." "I wasn't going to let him attack you like that," Daniel replied, his tone resolute. "You didn't deserve it," Alira sighed, shaking her head. "It doesn't matter what I deserve. What matters is the truth, and the truth is my presence here complicates things. For both our peoples." Daniel frowned. "Are you saying you want to step back? Give up?" "No," Alira said quickly. "But maybe there's another way. A way to show everyone that peace is possible without putting either of us in the middle." "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked, though he already suspected the answer. Alira hesitated, then looked at him directly. "I'll leave. Go into exile for real this time. If I'm no longer part of the negotiations, it might ease some of the tension. Maybe then the talks can move forward." Daniel stared at her, stunned. "No, absolutely not. You sacrificed enough already. I won't let you take the blame for something you didn't do." "It's not about blame," Alira said softly. "It's about doing what's best for everyone, even if it means walking away." Daniel shook his head vehemently. "If you leave, then I leave too. You're not facing this alone." For a moment, Alira looked surprised. Then, a faint smile touched her lips. "You would do that? Leave your home for me?" "Without hesitation," Daniel replied. "I told you before, you're not alone in this. Wherever you go, I go." Alira's expression softened, her green eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Why do you care so much?" "Because I believe in you," Daniel said simply. and because I care about you, more than I ever thought possible." The admission hung between them, raw and honest. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then slowly, Alira reached out, her hand brushing against his. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing in me, for standing by me." The decision to leave was not an easy one, but they knew it was necessary. Together, they prepared quietly, gathering supplies and planning their route. When the time came, they slipped away under the cover of darkness, avoiding detection from both sides. The journey was long and arduous, taking them far beyond the borders of the settlement and into uncharted territory. At first, life in exile was difficult. They relied on each other completely, sharing food, shelter, and warmth. Days were spent navigating treacherous landscapes, while nights were filled with quiet conversations and moments of reflection. Along the way, they encountered others who had been cast out by their society's humans, Velari, and even members of other alien races. Each had their own story of loss and struggle, but they all shared one thing in common: a desire for something better. Inspired by these encounters, Daniel and Alira began to envision a new kind of community, one built on cooperation rather than conflict. Slowly, they gathered these outcasts together, teaching them to work as a team and support one another. It wasn't easy. Old prejudices died hard, and tensions often flared. But Daniel and Alira led by example, showing that differences could be strengths rather than weaknesses. As weeks turned into months, their little group grew stronger. They built shelters, planted crops, and established trade routes with nearby settlements. Word of their efforts spread, reaching ears far beyond their small corner of the galaxy. Some dismissed them as dreamers, while others saw hope in their actions, a reminder that change was possible, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Through it all, Daniel and Alira remained inseparable. Their bond had grown deeper with each passing day, forged in the fires of adversity and strengthened by shared purpose. Though they had left their old lives behind, they had found something greater: a chance to create a future where humanity and the Velari could truly coexist. One evening, as they sat together watching the twin suns dip below the horizon, Daniel turned to Alira with a smile. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if we hadn't left?" "All the time," Alira admitted. "But I don't regret it, not for a second." "Me neither," Daniel said. "Because no matter where we're building something worth fighting for." Alira nodded, her gaze softening. Together, as the stars began to appear in the sky, lighting up the vast expanse above them, they allowed themselves a moment of peace. The road ahead would still be challenging, filled with obstacles neither of them could foresee. But for now they were content, knowing they had taken the first step toward a brighter future, one where unity, not division, defined the galaxy. Years passed, and the small community Daniel and Alira had built grew into something remarkable. What had started as a handful of outcasts struggling to survive became a thriving settlement, beacon of hope in a fractured galaxy. People from all walks of life came to join them, drawn by stories of unity and resilience. Humans worked alongside Velari, sharing knowledge and skills. Other alien species arrived too, each bringing their own unique gifts to the growing society. The settlement was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Its buildings were a mix of human ingenuity and Velari craftsmanship, blending practicality with beauty. Fields stretched out beyond the outskirts, lush with crops grown using methods shared by farmers from different worlds. Children played together, laughing and learning side by side, unburdened by the prejudices that had once divided their parents' generations. It was a place where differences were celebrated, not feared. Daniel and Alira remained at the heart of it all, guiding the community with wisdom and compassion. They weren't leaders in the traditional sense. They didn't rule or command, but their presence inspired trust and cooperation. When disputes arose, they listened patiently, helping others find solutions that worked for everyone. Their bond had become a symbol of what was possible when two very different people chose understanding over fear. One day, news arrived that changed everything. A delegation from Earth and the Velari homeworld had finally reached an agreement, a formal alliance between their peoples. It was a historic moment, one that marked the end of decades of hostility. The announcement spread quickly, reaching even the remote corners of the galaxy. When the message reached Daniel and Alira's settlement, the reaction was mixed. Some cheered, thrilled that peace had finally been achieved. Others felt bittersweet about it, knowing how much sacrifice had gone into making it happen. For Daniel and Alira, the news brought a flood of emotions, pride, relief, and a tinge of sadness. Their efforts had laid the foundation for this moment, but they had also walked away from their old lives to make it possible. "We did it," Daniel said softly as he and Alira stood together overlooking the bustling settlement. "After everything, we actually did it." Alira nodded, her green eyes reflecting the glow of the twin suns setting on the horizon. "Not just us. Everyone here played a part. This is their victory as much as ours." "But it started with you," Daniel said, turning to look at her. "Your courage, your vision." "And yours," Alira replied, a faint smile touching her lips. "If not for you, I might have given up long ago." They stood there for a while, watching the sky shift from gold to deep violet. The air was filled with the sounds of laughter and chatter from the settlement below. Life had moved forward, shaped by the choices they had made together. Weeks later, representatives from both Earth and the Velari arrived to visit the settlement. They came bearing gifts and gratitude, eager to see the place that had inspired so much change. Among them were familiar faces, people who had once doubted Daniel and Alira, but now looked at them with admiration. "You've created something extraordinary," one of the human delegates said during a ceremony held in their honor. "A model for how our peoples can live together." "It wasn't easy," Daniel admitted. "There were times when we thought it was impossible, but every step mattered, even the hard ones." Alira added, "Peace isn't something you achieve overnight. It's built brick by brick, choice by choice. And sometimes it means letting go of what you know to find something better." Her words resonated deeply, earning nods and murmurs of agreement from the crowd. After the ceremony, many approached Daniel and Alira to thank them personally. Some apologized for doubting them in the past, while others simply expressed their awe at what they had accomplished. As the visitors prepared to leave, one of the Velari elders approached Alira. He was older than most, his hair streaked with silver, but his eyes still carried the sharpness of a seasoned warrior. "You have done well," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "I misjudged you, and for that, I am sorry." Alira bowed her head slightly. "There's no need for apologies. We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them." The elder nodded, then turned to Daniel. "And you have earned my respect. Few humans would have dared to stand beside us as you did." "Thank you," Daniel replied, feeling humbled. "But none of this would have been possible without Alira. She taught me more than I could ever teach her." The elder smiled faintly before walking away, leaving Daniel and Alira alone once again. As the last of the visitors departed, the settlement returned to its usual rhythm. Life went on, quieter now, but no less meaningful. That evening, Daniel and Alira climbed to the top of a nearby hill, a spot they often visited to watch the stars. The sky was clear, dotted with countless pinpricks of light. A cool breeze swept through the air, carrying the scent of blooming flowers. "I never imagined it would turn out like this," Daniel said after a long silence. "When we left the negotiations, I thought we'd failed. But now you see that failure isn't always the end," Alira finished for him. "Sometimes it's just the beginning of something greater." Daniel chuckled softly. "You sound like a philosopher." "I've learned from the best," Alira teased, nudging him gently. They sat together for a while longer, content in each other's company. Neither of them needed to say much. Their bond spoke louder than words ever could. Over the years, They had faced challenges that would have broken most people. Yet through it all, they had found strength in each other and in the belief that a better future was worth fighting for. Eventually, Daniel broke the silence. Do you think they'll remember us? Back on Earth in the Velari homeworld? They already do, Illyra said confidently. Our story will be told not just here, but everywhere. It's proof that even the smallest actions can spark change. Daniel smiled, leaning back on his hands. Maybe they'll build statues of us someday. Illyra laughed, the sound light and musical. Let's hope not. I don't want to spend eternity standing still. They shared a quiet laugh, the kind that comes from years of shared experiences. As the night deepened, they stayed where they were, gazing up at the stars. Somewhere out there, countless worlds existed, each with its own struggles and triumphs. But for now, they were home in a place they had built together, surrounded by people who believed in the same dream. And though the galaxy was vast and full of uncertainty, Daniel and Illyra knew one thing for sure. They had made a difference. Together, they had shown that love and courage could bridge even the widest divides. Their legacy would endure, a reminder that peace was not just a distant ideal. It was a choice, made one step at a time, under the endless expanse of stars. They allowed themselves a moment of quiet joy. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led them to something beautiful. And as they sat there hand in hand, they knew they had found exactly what they had been searching for all along. A place where they truly belonged.